December 9th, 1945. The war in Europe had been over for 7 months. Germany was occupied, cities lay in ruins, millions of displaced people wandered through destroyed landscapes searching for home. The Allied victory was complete, but the peace was proving complicated. General George S. Patton, Jr. woke that Sunday morning in Bad Nauheim, Germany, where his headquarters was located. He was 60 years old, commander of the U.S. 15th Army, a position that was essentially administrative. No combat operations, no strategic decisions, just overseeing historical documentation of the war that had ended in May. Patton was restless and frustrated. 7 months earlier, he had commanded Third Army, one of the most powerful military forces in Europe. His armies had raced across France, driven through Germany, reached Czechoslovakia. He was America's most famous combat general. Newspapers called him Old Blood and Guts. Soldiers who served under him spoke of him with mixture of respect and fear. Enemy soldiers feared his name. Now he commanded a paper army with no real purpose. He felt sidelined, ignored, pushed into irrelevance while younger generals planned the occupation. His chief of staff, Major General Hobart Gay, had invited Patton on a pheasant hunting trip that morning. A chance to get out of headquarters, do something besides paperwork and meaningless meetings. Patton accepted immediately. Anything was better than sitting in an office. The hunting party would consist of 2 vehicles. Patton's 1938 Cadillac Series 75 staff car, a massive luxury vehicle painted olive drab for military use, and a Jeep carrying the hunting equipment, food, and a dog. Patton's driver was Private First Class Horace Woodring, a 19-year-old combat veteran who had driven for Patton during the war. Woodring was experienced, reliable, trusted. General Gay would ride in the Cadillac with Patton. The Jeep ahead of them was driven by Sergeant Joseph Scrouse. The plan was to hunt near Mannheim, about 30 miles from Bad Nauheim. The weather was cold, snow covered the ground, roads were icy and dangerous, but the hunting would be good. They departed headquarters around 900 a.m. The Jeep led, the Cadillac followed. Patton sat in the right rear seat. His usual position, Gay sat to his left. Woodring drove carefully. The roads were treacherous. Visibility was limited. They made one stop at the Roman ruins at Sailburg. Patton wanted to see the ancient site. He had studied classical history his entire life. Roman military campaigns fascinated him. He walked through the ruins for about 20 minutes, examining fortifications, discussing tactics with Gay. Then they returned to the vehicles and continued toward Mannheim. At some point during the drive, Patton moved to the front passenger seat. He wanted to warm his feet next to the heater. The back seat was cold. His feet were freezing. He sat in front for a while, then returned to his usual position in the right rear seat. The vehicles approached Mannheim from the south, following the N38 road toward the northern outskirts. At a military police checkpoint, they stopped briefly. The hunting dog in the Jeep was freezing. They transferred the dog to the Cadillac to keep it warm. They continued north. At a railroad-level crossing, the Jeep passed over, but the Cadillac was stopped by a passing train. Woodring waited. The train passed. The crossing gates lifted. Woodring pulled forward onto the road. About half a mile ahead, he noticed 2 U.S. Army trucks parked on the side of the road. One was a standard 2.5-ton GMC cargo truck, the workhorse of the U.S. Army. As Woodring drove toward them, one truck pulled onto the road heading toward the Cadillac. The time was approximately 11:45 a.m. The truck and the Cadillac were approaching each other. The road was 2 lanes. Snow and ice covered the pavement. Visibility was clear, no fog, no heavy snow, just cold winter conditions. The vehicles were traveling at moderate speeds. Woodring estimated he was driving about 20 miles per hour. The truck was moving slightly faster. As the vehicles closed distance, the truck suddenly veered left directly into the Cadillac's path. Woodring had no time to react. He hit the brakes, but the icy road prevented effective stopping. The Cadillac collided with the truck's right side. The impact was not severe by modern standards. Low speed, glancing blow rather than head-on collision. The Cadillac's front end was damaged but not destroyed. The truck sustained minor damage. Woodring was shaken but uninjured. Gay was thrown forward but not seriously hurt. The dog escaped through an open window and ran away. Patton was thrown forward violently. His head and neck struck a metal railing or partition that separated the front and rear seats. The impact was catastrophic. Patton collapsed backward into the seat. Blood poured from a deep laceration that extended from the bridge of his nose to the top of his head. He was conscious, but could not move. His neck was broken. Spinal cord severely damaged. Paralysis from the neck down was immediate and complete. Gay and Woodring tried to help Patton. He was conscious, aware, able to speak. He told Gay his neck was broken, that he could not feel anything below his shoulders, that he could not move his arms or legs. Gay tried to keep him calm, told him help was coming. Woodring flagged down the first vehicle that passed. By extraordinary coincidence, it was an army ambulance. The medic, Sergeant Leroy Ogden, climbed into the Cadillac and assessed Patton's injuries. Ogden recognized immediately that Patton's injuries were serious. Head wound, probable spinal injury, paralysis. He applied pressure to stop the bleeding from the scalp laceration, stabilized Patton's head and neck as much as possible. The ambulance drove Patton to the 130th Station Hospital in Heidelberg, about 20 miles away. The journey took approximately 1 hour. Patton remained conscious the entire time. He knew his condition was grave. He told Ogden he was certain his neck was broken, that his military career was over, that he would never walk again. At the hospital, doctors confirmed Patton's self-diagnosis. His third cervical vertebra was dislocated. His spinal cord was severely compressed, but not completely severed. Paralysis was complete from the neck down. He could breathe only with difficulty. Respiratory muscles were barely functioning. Doctors gave him a guarded prognosis. He might survive, he might regain some function, but recovery would take months or years. Full recovery was unlikely. Military police arrived at the accident scene shortly after Patton was evacuated. Officers from the 818th Military Police Company investigated. They interviewed Woodring, interviewed the truck driver, inspected both vehicles, took measurements, documented the scene. The investigation was routine, standard procedure for any traffic accident involving military vehicles. Nothing suggested foul play, just an unfortunate collision caused by icy roads and driver error. The truck driver was Technical Sergeant 5th Class Robert L. Thompson. He was 20 years old, from Camden, New Jersey. He had been driving the truck with 2 other soldiers as passengers. Thompson's behavior after the accident struck witnesses as odd. He seemed unconcerned, almost cheerful, grinning constantly. Woodring felt Thompson might be drunk. The two passengers with Thompson were never properly identified. They disappeared from the scene before military police arrived. Thompson told investigators he was driving from a depot in Mannheim. His truck was loaded with quartermaster supplies. He was heading to another location. The road was icy. As he approached the Cadillac, his truck skidded left into the other lane. He could not correct the skid before the collision. It was an accident, nothing more. The investigators found no evidence contradicting Thompson's statement. The road was indeed icy. Vehicles skidding was common. The collision was consistent with loss of traction. Military police filed their report on December 13th. The accident was classified as routine. No charges were filed against Thompson or Woodring. Both drivers were returned to their units. No disciplinary action was taken. The investigation concluded that the collision resulted from hazardous road conditions and driver error. Nothing criminal, nothing suspicious, just bad luck on a winter morning. The report was filed in military archives and forgotten. Meanwhile, Patton lay paralyzed in Heidelberg Hospital. Specialists were flown in from the United States. His wife Beatrice traveled from America to be with him. Doctors tried every available treatment: traction to stabilize his spine, medications to reduce swelling, physical therapy to maintain muscle function. For the first few days, Patton's condition was critical but stable. He remained conscious, spoke with his wife and staff, made jokes about his condition. Refused to accept that he was dying. By December 15th, Patton showed slight improvement. Some respiratory muscle movement returned. He could breathe more easily. Doctors discussed transporting him to the United States for long-term treatment. Preparations were made. A specially equipped aircraft was readied. Medical personnel were assigned. The plan was to fly Patton to Boston, where specialists could provide extended care. For a few days, hope existed that he might survive. On December 20th, Patton's condition suddenly deteriorated. His breathing became labored. His lungs filled with fluid. Pulmonary edema developed rapidly. His heart struggled under the strain. Congestive heart failure followed. Doctors worked desperately to stabilize him, but the damage was too severe. At 5:50 p.m. on December 21st, 1945, 12 days after the accident, George S. Patton died. He was 60 years old. The official cause of death was pulmonary edema and congestive heart failure resulting from the injuries sustained in the December 9th automobile accident. Patton was buried on December 24th, 1945, at the American Cemetery in Ham, Luxembourg. His grave was placed among the soldiers of Third Army who had died during the war. Patton had requested burial with his men rather than at Arlington National Cemetery or a family plot. Thousands attended the funeral: soldiers who had served under him, generals who had fought alongside him, civilians who admired him. The ceremony was military, honors befitting a four-star general, volleys fired, taps played, an American flag draped over his coffin. For 30 years after Patton's death, nobody questioned the official account. The accident was accepted as tragic but straightforward. Icy roads, driver error, bad luck. A great general killed in a mundane traffic collision, but in 1974, something changed. A British novelist named Frederick Nolan published a book called The Algonquin Project. The book was fiction, a thriller about a plot to assassinate a famous American general loosely based on Patton. The novel was not particularly successful, but it planted an idea. What if Patton was murdered in 1978? The Algonquin Project was adapted into a film called Brass Target. The movie portrayed a conspiracy to kill Patton involving stolen Nazi gold and shadowy intelligence operatives. The film was poorly reviewed and quickly forgotten. But combined with the novel, it created public awareness of the possibility that Patton's death was not accidental. Conspiracy theories began circulating. People started questioning the official story, asking why such a prominent general died in such an ordinary way. Then in 1979, a man named Douglas Bazata made a dramatic public confession. Bazata was a former OSS operative during World War II. He had earned numerous decorations for dangerous missions behind enemy lines. He was a trained assassin, an expert in covert operations. At a gathering of about 450 former intelligence officers, Bazata stood up and announced that he had killed George S. Patton, not accidentally, deliberately, on orders from OSS Director General William Donovan. Bazata's story was detailed and dramatic. He claimed that Patton had become a political liability, his vocal criticism of Soviet Union, his opposition to denazification policies, his controversial statements about Germans and Jews, his increasingly erratic behavior. American and British leaders wanted him silenced. Donovan allegedly ordered Bazata to arrange an accident that would kill Patton without arousing suspicion. Bazata said he accepted the mission. According to Bazata, the plan involved two parts. First, arrange a staged automobile collision that would appear accidental. Second, if Patton survived the collision, finish him in the hospital using poison that would mimic natural death. Bazata claimed he prepared the accident meticulously. He had informants in Patton's headquarters who told him about the hunting trip planned for December 9th. He knew the route. He knew the timing. He positioned himself along the road. Bazata said he used a special weapon, a compressed air gun that fired small lead pellets. The weapon was silent. The projectile was designed to cause injury that resembled blunt force trauma rather than gunshot wound. When Patton's car approached, Bazata fired through a small gap in the window. The pellets struck Patton in the head and neck. The collision with Thompson's truck happened simultaneously, either by design or coincidence. The impact masked the gunshot injury. Patton's wounds appeared consistent with traffic accident. When Patton survived the accident and the alleged shooting, Bazata claimed the backup plan was activated. Someone, possibly a nurse or doctor working for intelligence services, administered poison to Patton in the hospital. The poison caused pulmonary edema and heart failure, conditions that appeared natural given Patton's injuries. Patton died 12 days after the accident. Mission accomplished. No autopsy was performed. No investigation questioned the official cause of death. The perfect assassination. Bazata's confession received significant media attention. Books were written exploring his claims. Investigative journalists interviewed him repeatedly. He provided additional details, names of alleged conspirators, technical specifications of weapons used, timeline of events. His story was compelling and detailed. Many people believed him. The conspiracy theory of Patton's assassination entered American popular culture and has remained there ever since. However, serious problems exist with Bazata's account. First, many details conflict with documented evidence from the accident scene. Bazata claimed he fired through a gap in the car window, but witnesses, including Gay and Woodring, stated no windows were open. The car was closed because of cold weather. Bazata said the gap was only 4 inches, supposedly created when Patton toured the Roman ruins earlier. No evidence supports this claim. Second, Patton's injuries were thoroughly documented by multiple doctors at Heidelberg Hospital. The head laceration and spinal injury were completely consistent with blunt force trauma from collision. No gunshot wound was noted. No projectile was recovered. No entry wound was observed. Medical records show injuries exactly matching what would be expected from the accident Woodring and Gay described. Nothing suggested shooting. Third, Bazata's story about poison in the hospital requires massive conspiracy. Doctors, nurses, hospital staff would all need to be complicit or deceived. Patton was under constant observation. His wife was present. Military personnel were everywhere. Administering poison undetected would be extraordinarily difficult. No evidence of poison was found because no autopsy was performed. But no autopsy was performed because no suspicion of foul play existed at the time. Fourth, Bazata changed his story multiple times. In some versions, he shot Patton himself. In others, someone else did the shooting while he observed. In some versions, he arranged everything. In others, he was asked but refused. These inconsistencies undermine credibility. If Bazata was telling truth about a real assassination, his story should be consistent. Instead, it evolved and changed depending on audience and circumstances. Fifth, Bazata's motivation for the confession is suspect. He was in financial difficulty in 1979. The confession generated book deals, interviews, paid appearances. He profited significantly from the story. Some investigators believe Bazata invented the assassination narrative for money, that he combined real knowledge of OSS operations with fictional elements to create a compelling story that would sell. His background as a genuine war hero made the story more believable even if false. Additional conspiracy theories emerged beyond Bazata's claims. Some suggested Soviet NKVD, predecessor to KGB, assassinated Patton. The reasoning was that Patton was vocal critic of Soviet Union. He advocated for aggressive policies toward communism. He wanted to continue war against Soviets immediately after defeating Germany. Soviet intelligence might have eliminated him to remove a dangerous opponent, but no evidence supports this theory. Soviet records released after Cold War contained no mention of operation against Patton. Others pointed to missing records. The Military Police Investigation Report from December 1945 is not in National Archives where it should be filed. Some accident scene photographs are missing. Patton's medical records from Heidelberg are incomplete. Conspiracy theorists argue these missing documents were deliberately removed to hide evidence of assassination. However, Missing records are common in military archives. Documents are lost, misfiled, destroyed accidentally. Absence of records is not proof of conspiracy. The fact that no autopsy was performed is cited as suspicious. Why not examine Patton's body if there was any question about cause of death? But in 1945, autopsy was not standard procedure for accidental death. The cause was obvious: injuries from car accident. Complications developed. He died. Doctors had no reason to suspect poison or foul play. Autopsy seemed unnecessary. The decision was made by medical professionals following normal protocols, not by conspirators covering up murder. Robert Thompson, the truck driver, remains somewhat mysterious. His behavior after the accident was odd, grinning, seemingly unconcerned, possibly drunk. His two passengers were never identified. He was 50 miles from where he was supposed to be on an unauthorized joyride. These facts are suspicious. But they do not prove assassination conspiracy. Thompson might simply have been a young soldier doing something stupid, driving drunk or recklessly, acting inappropriately after realizing he hit a famous general's car. Stupidity and guilt explain his behavior as easily as conspiracy. Thompson returned to Camden, New Jersey, after the war. He lived a normal life, never spoke publicly about the accident, never claimed he was part of assassination plot, never sought publicity or money from his role in Patton's death. He died in obscurity decades later. If he was part of conspiracy, his silence is remarkable. Conspirators typically either boast or live in fear. Thompson did neither. He simply went home and lived quietly. This suggests he was an accidental participant in tragedy, not an assassin. The strongest evidence against assassination conspiracy is the sheer number of people who would need to be involved. Thompson and his two passengers, military police investigators, hospital doctors and nurses, Patton's wife, General Gay, driver Woodring, staff at headquarters who knew about the hunting trip, intelligence operatives, anyone who filed or accessed records. Maintaining silence among so many people for so long is nearly impossible. Conspiracies leak. People talk. Deathbed confessions happen. But except for Bazata, whose story is inconsistent and self-serving, nobody has ever confirmed assassination plot. The mundane explanation remains most consistent with evidence. Patton went hunting. Thompson was driving recklessly or drunk on icy roads. The truck skidded into Patton's car. Patton was thrown forward and broke his neck. He developed complications and died 12 days later. Tragic, anticlimactic, unsatisfying for a great general's death, but consistent with documented facts, witness testimony, and medical evidence. Sometimes great men die in ordinary ways. History does not always provide dramatic endings.